The massive research vessel hung silently in Earth's orbit, its sophisticated sensors gathering data about the planet below. Inside, Dr. Gray stood before the central display, his four eyes blinking rapidly as he processed the information streaming across the screen. After 3 months of careful observation, the patterns were becoming clear, and they were unlike anything he had seen in his 50 years of species classification. The humans were predators, that much was certain, but they were unlike any predator species the Galactic Council had encountered before. Dr. Gray pulled up footage from various locations around the planet, showing humans in their natural habitats. In Africa, hunters chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. In Asia, farmers used complex tools to shape their environment. In Europe, engineers built machines that could reach the stars. But it was the readings from North America, particularly the region known as the United States, that made his antennae twitch with excitement and concern. The data showed something extraordinary. "Display comparison charts," he commanded. The screen filled with graphs showing various predatory traits: resource consumption, technological advancement, military capacity, and territorial expansion. The global human average was already high enough to classify them as a predator species, but the American readings were off the charts. Dr. Gray's assistant, Tech Officer Blue, entered the observation deck with a fresh batch of data. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We've been monitoring their entertainment content, and the Americans, they turned everything into a competition. Even their food consumption is competitive." The screen showed footage of something called a hot dog eating contest. Dr. Gray watched in fascination as humans stuffed their faces with processed meat products at incredible speeds while thousands cheered. In another video, humans deliberately jumped out of perfectly functional aircraft for something called fun. "They're children," Blue continued. "They play games simulating hunting and combat from an early age. But instead of growing less aggressive with technological advancement, they channeled these instincts into new forms of competition." Dr. Gray moved to the window, looking down at the blue-green planet below. The humans had already reached their moon with relatively primitive technology. Their rate of advancement was exponential, and the Americans were leading the charge. They had taken the predatory instincts common to all humans and turned them into an art form. "Send a priority message to the Council," Dr. Gray ordered. "The standard classification protocols may be insufficient for this species, particularly regarding regional variations. The Americans have developed a unique cultural acceleration of natural predatory traits. They don't just hunt for food or territory. They hunt for achievement itself." The message was sent, but Dr. Gray knew the Council would be skeptical. They had never before created a separate classification for a regional group within a species. But as he watched more footage, Americans racing vehicles at deadly speeds, climbing mountains without safety equipment, exploring the most extreme environments on their planet, he knew this was different. A loud alarm interrupted his thoughts. One of their cloaked observation drones had been detected by American military sensors. Within minutes, fighter aircraft were investigating the area. The speed of response was impressive, but what truly caught Dr. Gray's attention was the pilots' behavior. They showed no fear, only curiosity and excitement at the possibility of encountering something unknown. "Fascinating," he muttered, watching the pilots perform complex maneuvers around the area where they detected the anomaly. They don't retreat from potential threats, they investigate them. Even their defensive behaviors are aggressive. Dr. Gray made his final notes as the research vessel prepared to leave Earth's orbit. The humans were definitely predators, evolving from persistence hunters into tool users, and then into a spacefaring species. But the Americans, they were something else entirely. They had taken the baseline predatory traits of humanity and amplified them through culture, competition, and an insatiable drive to push boundaries. As the ship engaged its faster-than-light drive, Dr. Gray couldn't help but wonder what would happen when this species, particularly the Americans, joined the galactic community. One thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy as Dr. Gray prepared his presentation. The massive crystal screens behind him displayed data from Earth, showing various human activities that had caught the research team's attention. The council members, representing 50 different species, watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Distinguished council members, Dr. Gray began, his voice steady despite his inner nervousness. Our 3-month observation of Earth has revealed something unprecedented. While the entire human species displays predatory characteristics, we've discovered a subset that exhibits enhanced predatory traits that surpass anything in our records. The screens shifted to show footage from various American military exercises. Soldiers ran through obstacle courses carrying heavy equipment, Marines conducted amphibious landings, and Air Force pilots performed complex maneuvers that seemed to defy the limits of their aircraft. The Americans, Dr. Gray continued, have created a culture that not only embraces their predatory nature, but actively enhances it. They've turned competition into an art form, combat into a science, and continual improvement into a way of life. Council Leader Stone leaned forward, his crystalline form catching the light. Are you suggesting we create a separate classification for a regional group? This has never been done before. Dr. Gray nodded and switched the display to show a series of graphs. Look at their resource consumption patterns. An average American uses 5 times the resources of other humans. Their technological advancement rate is 30% faster than the global average. Their military spending exceeds the next 10 nations combined. The chamber erupted in murmurs. A reptilian council member named Swift flicked her tongue nervously. This sounds dangerous. Perhaps we should consider quarantine protocols. With respect, Dr. Gray countered, that would be a mistake. The Americans have demonstrated something remarkable. They've channeled their predatory instincts into productive pursuits. Yes, they maintain powerful military forces, but they've also created incredible advances in medicine, space exploration, and science. The screens now showed American achievements. The moon landing, the development of the internet, breakthrough medical procedures, and massive engineering projects. They don't just hunt for food or territory, Dr. Gray explained. They hunt for knowledge, for achievement, for progress itself. Council Leader Stone's crystalline surface rippled with concern. But their aggression levels are high, Dr. Gray admitted, but controlled. They've created complex systems of laws and values that guide their predatory instincts. They compete fiercely in business, sports, and technology, but they do it within established rules. It's not mindless aggression. It's directed, purposeful, and often surprisingly constructive. The screens displayed footage of American emergency responses to natural disasters, showing the same aggressive efficiency being used to save lives instead of take them. Teams of firefighters rushing into burning buildings, Coast Guard helicopters braving storms to rescue stranded sailors, and disaster relief teams working tirelessly in the aftermath of hurricanes. This is what makes them unique, Dr. Gray said. They can switch from predator to protector instantly. Their aggressive traits serve both offensive and defensive purposes. They're not just predators. They're guardians. A silence fell over the chamber as the council members processed this information. Finally, Council Leader Stone spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Gray? A new classification, Dr. Gray replied. One that recognizes the unique combination of traits we've observed. The Americans have created something new. A cultural framework that amplifies predatory traits while harnessing them for advancement and protection. We need to understand this if we're going to interact with Earth effectively. The council members began discussing among themselves, their voices creating a symphony of different tones and frequencies. Dr. Gray waited patiently, knowing that his next task would be even more challenging. Documenting and analyzing exactly how American culture had managed to accelerate human predatory evolution. As the debate continued around him, Dr. Gray pulled up one last piece of footage on his personal display. An American football game. He watched as the players, encased in protective armor, crashed into each other with controlled violence while following complex strategies and strict rules. It was, he thought, the perfect symbol of what made Americans unique. The combination of aggressive power and structured discipline, all in the name of competition and achievement. The diplomatic meeting station floated peacefully in neutral space, its gleaming silver hull reflecting distant starlight. Inside, the first official meeting between Earth representatives and the Galactic Council was about to begin. Ambassador Wood adjusted his tie as he looked around the room, taking in the diverse array of alien species. His military training made him notice all the exits, potential cover spots, and items that could be used as weapons. Old habits died hard. The Council had requested that Earth send representatives from different nations to this historic meeting. Along with Wood were diplomats from China, Russia, India, and the European Union. Dr. Gray watched from his observation post, especially interested in how the Americans would handle formal diplomatic protocols. Nobody expected the pirates to attack. The Ravager ships came out of nowhere, their stealth technology letting them slip past the station's outer defenses. The first explosion rocked the station, sending everyone sprawling. Emergency force fields snapped into place as warning sirens blared. The alien diplomats panicked. Most species in the galaxy had evolved past physical combat, relying on technology for defense. But as 6 armed pirates burst into the conference room, they saw something they didn't expect. The humans weren't running. Ambassador Wood had already flipped the heavy conference table on its side, creating cover. "Get behind here now," he shouted to everyone in the room, his voice cutting through the chaos with practiced command. The other human diplomats moved with surprising speed, helping stunned alien representatives to safety. The pirates, confident in their superior technology, weren't prepared for what happened next. Wood's eyes scanned the room, seeing what others didn't: opportunities. "Anyone here know how to throw a punch?" he asked the other human diplomats. The Russian and Indian representatives nodded. What followed would be talked about in council chambers for years to come. Wood grabbed a decorative metal pole from a nearby wall, spinning it like a staff. The pirates' energy weapons were dangerous, but they hadn't trained for close combat. They didn't expect their prey to charge straight at them. Wood moved with the speed and precision of a predator, his makeshift weapon striking with brutal efficiency. The Russian diplomat, a former Olympic wrestler, grappled one pirate to the ground while the Indian representative, trained in martial arts, disabled another. The Chinese diplomat found the environmental controls and suddenly filled the room with thick fog from the fire suppression system. Dr. Gray watched in amazement as the Americans' predatory traits emerged. Wood wasn't just fighting. He was controlling the battlefield. He directed other humans to strategic positions, used the environment to his advantage, and coordinated their efforts like a well-oiled machine. Even in formal clothes, even years away from active service, his combat instincts were razor-sharp. The doors. Wood shouted as more pirates tried to enter. The European diplomat had already figured out how to override the door controls, sealing them shut. Wood had turned the conference room into a fortress in minutes. The station's security forces arrived 10 minutes later to find an unexpected scene. The pirates were all incapacitated, tied up with torn curtain cords and computer cables. Ambassador Wood was treating a minor wound on an alien diplomat's arm, using a first aid kit he found. The other human diplomats were helping restore order, their formal clothes dusty and torn, but their composure intact. Council Leader Stone arrived shortly after, surveying the scene with his crystalline eyes. "Ambassador Wood," he said slowly, "your actions were most unexpected." Wood shrugged, still checking the room for threats even as he spoke. "Where I come from, we have a saying: hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Every American learns to be ready for anything." Dr. Gray moved closer, unable to contain his scientific curiosity. "You turned everyday objects into weapons, coordinated a group defense, and protected non-combatants, all without any preparation. How?" "That's just how we think." Wood replied, finally allowing himself to relax slightly. Americans don't see things for what they are. We see them for what they could be. That statue, potential club. Those curtains, restraints. That door, choke point. We're always ready, always adapting. It's in our DNA. As the cleanup began, Dr. Gray made extensive notes. The incident had proven everything he'd tried to tell the Council about American predatory traits. They hadn't just survived the attack. They'd dominated it, protected others, and done it all with a calm efficiency that was both impressive and terrifying. The holographic displays in the Council's research center flickered with images from Earth's history as Dr. Gray and his team dove deeper into their investigation. After the diplomatic station incident, the Council had given them unlimited resources to understand how Americans had developed their unique predatory traits. Tech Officer Blue pulled up footage from different periods of American history, starting with the early colonies. "Look at this pattern," she said, pointing to the data streams. "When most prey species face hardship, they become more cautious. When predator species face hardship, they become more aggressive. But Americans, they become more innovative." Dr. Gray nodded, watching scenes from the American Revolution. "They took ideas from every culture they encountered and made them more effective," he observed. "British military tactics, Native American stealth techniques, French engineering. They absorbed it all and made it their own." The screen showed waves of immigration throughout American history. Unlike other nations that stayed relatively isolated, America had become a mixing pot of predatory traits from around the world. German efficiency, Italian passion, Irish determination, Japanese discipline. All these traits had merged into something entirely new. "Sir, you need to see this comparison," called out Research Assistant Green from another station. He showed two sets of data side by side. Most nations used their predatory traits for basic survival or territorial expansion. But Americans turned everything into a competition for improvement. The evidence was everywhere. They didn't just build cars, they made them faster every year. They didn't just build buildings, they made them taller. They didn't just explore space, they turned it into a race to the moon. Even their games reflected this mindset. Baseball wasn't just about hitting a ball, it was about breaking records. Football wasn't just about scoring, it was about pushing human physical limits. "Play the entertainment analysis," Dr. Gray requested. The screens filled with American movies, TV shows, and games. Even their stories revealed their predatory nature. They made movies about fighting aliens, surviving disasters, overcoming impossible odds. Their children played games about building better cities, commanding armies, exploring new worlds. Their adaptation rate is off the charts. Blue noted, bringing up more data. From horse and buggy to moon landing in just 66 years. From basic phones to smartphones in less than 30 years. From simple computers to artificial intelligence in a few decades. Dr. Gray moved to another display showing American responses to major challenges. During wars, their entire society transformed overnight. Factories switched from making cars to tanks. Women moved from homes to shipyards. Scientists dropped everything to work on new weapons. Even their children helped, collecting scrap metal and growing victory gardens. "It's not just about being predators," Dr. Gray muttered, making notes. "They've developed a unique ability to shift their entire society into high gear when threatened or challenged. They don't just fight, they mobilize everything." The team spent hours analyzing American sports, another unique expression of their predatory nature. Other nations played sports, but Americans turned them into massive industries, complete with statistics, strategies, and constant innovation. They studied plays like military maneuvers, trained like warriors, and celebrated victories like successful hunts. "Look at their business practices," Green pointed out, showing economic data. American companies didn't just compete, they revolutionized entire industries. They turned shopping into an art form, fast food into an empire, and entertainment into a global force. They weren't content with finding a niche. They wanted to reshape the entire market. Dr. Gray compiled all this information into a report for the Council. The Americans hadn't just preserved their predatory instincts. They had accelerated their evolution through cultural means. They had created a society that rewarded innovation, celebrated competition, and turned adaptation into a way of life. As he finished the report, Dr. Gray added one final note. The most remarkable thing about American predatory traits isn't their strength or speed. It's their ability to unite different predatory strategies into something new. They're not just predators. They're predatory innovators. And in a galaxy full of specialized species, that makes them uniquely dangerous and uniquely valuable. The emergency alarms in the council chamber hadn't stopped ringing for 3 days straight. Reports of Ravager attacks flooded in from across the galaxy. Colony after colony fell as the savage alien race pushed deeper into civilized space. The council members watched in horror as another defensive fleet was torn apart by the Ravagers' superior tactics and savage determination. Council Leader Stone's crystalline form vibrated with stress as he reviewed the latest casualty figures. 30 colonies lost, 15 space stations destroyed, and millions of civilians displaced. The Ravagers were unlike anything they'd faced before, a species that combined advanced technology with brutal aggression. "Our standard defense protocols have failed," announced Swift, her reptilian scales dark with exhaustion. "The Ravagers adapt too quickly. Every strategy we try works once, then they counter it. We've lost more ships in 3 days than in the last century." Dr. Gray stood quietly in the corner, watching the chaos unfold. He had seen this pattern before, in Earth's history. The Ravagers were acting like America's past opponents: the British Empire, the German war machine, the Japanese fleet. All had seemed unstoppable at first. "We should evacuate the outer colonies," someone suggested. "Fall back to our core worlds. The Ravagers will just follow us," another council member argued. "We need to negotiate." "They don't negotiate," Swift hissed. "They only understand power and violence. We need—" She paused, her tongue flicking nervously. "We need predators to fight predators." All eyes turned to Dr. Gray. He stepped forward, his 4 eyes blinking steadily. "Earth has recently joined the galactic community. They have limited space combat experience. But," he pulled up his research files, "the Americans have something we need right now. They're adaptable predators who specialize in facing seemingly unbeatable odds." The council chamber erupted in argument. Asking humans, especially Americans, for military help was unprecedented. They were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous. But as another emergency signal lit up the screens, another colony under attack, the arguments died down. Council Leader Stone turned his crystalline face to Dr. Gray. "Make the call." The response from Earth's governments was quick but cautious. They wanted to help but needed time to prepare their forces for space combat. The Americans, however, had a different reaction. Within hours of receiving the message, American military commanders were already requesting data on Ravager tactics, ship capabilities, and battle footage. "They're not acting like a newly contacted species should," Blue reported to Dr. Gray as they watched the Americans work. "They're treating this like they've been fighting space battles for years. Because to them, combat is combat," Dr. Gray explained. "Whether it's in space or on the ground, they see patterns others miss. Watch." On the main screen, American analysts were breaking down Ravager attack formations, finding weaknesses no one else had noticed. Their generals were already developing counter-strategies, their engineers were modifying ship designs, and their pilots were running combat simulations. The other human nations offered support, but it was the Americans who threw themselves into the challenge with almost frightening enthusiasm. They weren't just preparing for defense, they were planning to take the fight to the Ravagers. "Sir," Blue said quietly, "some council members are worried. The Americans are asking for access to our most advanced weapons technology. They want to combine it with their own military systems. Should we trust them?" Dr. Gray watched as Ambassador Wood coordinated with American military commanders, their eyes bright with the thrill of an upcoming hunt. "We don't have a choice," he replied. "The Ravagers are predators who rely on overwhelming force. The Americans are predators who specialize in beating overwhelming force." As the preparations continued, Dr. Gray added to his research notes, "When faced with a superior predator, most species retreat. Americans advance. When others see impossible odds, they see a challenge. When others prepare for defeat, they prepare for victory. They don't just fight. They mobilize their entire society for war, turning every resource, every ability, every scrap of innovation toward a single goal: winning." The galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before: American predatory instincts unleashed on a cosmic scale. The massive view screen in the Council's war room displayed the ongoing space battle. Everyone watched in stunned silence as the American-led fleet engaged the Ravagers. It had been just 2 weeks since Earth joined the fight, but those weeks had changed everything. General Hawk stood at the command station, his weathered face illuminated by holographic displays. Unlike the Council's precise, by-the-book commanders, he ran the battle like a fluid dance of death. Ships moved in seemingly chaotic patterns that somehow formed perfect traps for the enemy. "Delta Group, press the attack on their left flank," he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Make them think you're overextended." The American ships, modified with alien technology, pushed forward aggressively. The Ravagers took the bait, moving to encircle what looked like easy prey. "Now," Hawk commanded. Hidden fighter squadrons burst from behind nearby asteroids, their hybrid weapons, combining American missile technology with alien energy systems, tearing into the surprised Ravager ships. The Americans had learned from Earth's air combat history. Altitude advantage became position advantage in space. Dr. Gray watched in fascination. "They're not just fighting," he explained to the stunned council members. "They're hunting. Every retreat is a trap. Every weakness is a lure. They're using the Ravagers' predatory instincts against them." The American approach to space combat shocked both allies and enemies. They didn't maintain rigid formations like other species. Their ships moved like packs of wolves, breaking apart and regrouping, always attacking from unexpected angles. They had taken lessons from every war in Earth's history and adapted them to space. "Multiple Ravager capital ships approaching from Sector 7, reported Tech Officer Blue. The massive enemy vessels emerged from hyperspace, their weapons charging. The council members held their breath, expecting the American fleet to retreat from such overwhelming force. Instead, Hawk smiled. "Spring the trap," he ordered. Suddenly, the seemingly scattered American forces moved with perfect coordination. Smaller ships darted between the massive Ravager vessels, causing them to hold fire to avoid hitting their own ships. Modified cargo ships released clouds of smart mines, transformed from simple Earth satellite technology with alien enhancements. "Those are their supply ships," one council member noted in confusion. "Why risk them in combat?" "Because nobody expects a supply ship to be dangerous," Hawk explained, his grin growing wider. "The best ambush is the one your enemy never sees coming." The battle continued to unfold like a deadly chess game. The Americans had studied the Ravagers' tactics, learned their patterns, and developed counters for everything. When the Ravagers adapted, the Americans adapted faster. When the Ravagers brought in new weapons, the Americans had already prepared defenses. But it wasn't just about military tactics. American engineers had worked around the clock to modify ships, weapons, and defensive systems. They combined Earth's crude but creative technology with advanced alien systems in ways nobody had thought possible. They didn't follow the rules of space combat. They rewrote them. "Look at their pilot behavior," Dr. Gray pointed out. The American pilots flew with a combination of aggressive skill and improvisational flair that baffled both allies and enemies. They pulled maneuvers that their ships shouldn't have been capable of, pushing both machines and themselves to the absolute limit. The final phase of the battle began as the Ravager fleet, frustrated by their inability to land decisive blows, formed up for one massive charge. It was their standard tactic when faced with difficulty. Overwhelm with brute force. "They're doing exactly what we wanted," Hawk said quietly. He pressed a button, sending a simple signal. Suddenly, the asteroid field behind the Ravager fleet came alive. Hundreds of modified mining drones, their simple Earth AI combined with alien tech, activated in perfect synchronization. The Ravagers found themselves caught in a massive three-dimensional trap. As the battle drew to its inevitable close, Dr. Gray made notes for his ongoing research. The Americans hadn't just adapted to space combat, they had revolutionized it. They'd brought their entire predatory nature to bear: the cunning of a wolf, the patience of a spider, the coordinated attacks of a pack, and the relentless pursuit of a hunting eagle. The galaxy was learning what Earth's enemies had learned long ago. When Americans went to war, they didn't just fight to win. They'd fought to dominate. 3 months after the decisive victory over the Ravagers, the Galactic Council gathered for a historic session. The Grand Chamber looked different now. Battle footage played on some screens while others showed reconstruction efforts across the galaxy. At the center of it all stood Dr. Gray, presenting his final analysis of human, and specifically American, predatory characteristics. "We must recognize that our previous understanding of predator species was incomplete," he stated, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled council members. "The Americans have shown us that predatory traits, when properly channeled, can become a force for stability rather than chaos." The screens displayed scenes from the recent conflict. American ships protecting civilian evacuation vessels, their crews working tirelessly to save alien lives. Engineers sharing modified technology with other species, teaching them how to better defend themselves. Military advisors training other races in new combat techniques. They didn't just defeat the Ravagers. Council leader Stone observed, his crystalline form reflecting the light of the displays. They changed how we think about warfare, technology, and cooperation. Swift, who had initially been one of the strongest voices against human involvement, nodded her scaled head. They turned their predatory nature into a shield for others. When they hunt not just for themselves, but for their allies. The Council watched footage of American response teams helping rebuild destroyed colonies. The same aggressive efficiency they showed in battle was now directed at construction projects. Their competitive nature drove them to rebuild faster, better, and stronger than before. "I propose a new classification," Dr. Gray announced. "Adaptive apex predators, a category for species that can channel their predatory instincts into beneficial activities for the larger community." The screen shifted to show data from Earth. Other nations had begun adopting American methods, but with their own cultural twists. The whole planet was evolving, driven by the American example of turning predatory traits into tools for advancement. Ambassador Wood stood up to address the Council. He looked more comfortable now, wearing a modified uniform that combined Earth military styling with galactic diplomatic symbols. "We don't just want to fight your wars," he said. "We want to help build a stronger galaxy. Americans don't just hunt for prey. We hunt for solutions, for improvements, for progress." The Council members watched as more data streamed across the screens. American businesses were already adapting alien technology for peaceful uses. Their universities were combining Earth science with galactic knowledge to solve long-standing problems. Their entertainment industry was creating shows and games that helped different species understand each other better. "Look at how they've influenced our own military doctrine," Swift pointed out. The screens showed alien ships now moving in more fluid formations, adopting American-style tactics. "They didn't force us to become predators. They taught us to be smarter defenders." Dr. Gray moved to his final presentation slides. "The Americans have shown us that being a predator species isn't about mindless aggression. It's about adaptation, innovation, and the drive to improve. They've turned their hunting instincts into a search for knowledge, their territorial instincts into a desire to protect others, and their competitive nature into a force for positive change." The Council voted unanimously to create the new classification, but they went further, establishing new programs to study how predatory traits could be positively channeled. The Americans would serve as instructors, teaching other species how to balance aggression with protection, competition with cooperation. Ambassador Wood smiled as he watched the proceedings. "You know," he said to Dr. Gray, "back home we have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility." We never forgot that, even as we pushed ourselves to become stronger. As the session concluded, Dr. Gray made his final research note. The Americans have proven that being an apex predator isn't about being the strongest or most aggressive. It's about being the most adaptable, the most innovative, and, surprisingly, the most protective of others. They've shown us that predatory traits, properly directed, don't just serve the predator. They can serve the entire galaxy. The new galactic order was taking shape, and at its heart was a paradox that now made perfect sense. The most dangerous predators had become the galaxy's greatest protectors.